When I was appointed finance minister in July 2015, 1 out of 5 people I met congratulated me, and the other 4 offered me their commiserations. So I'm hoping now that by June that ratio will have changed. And I think there's good reasons to hope that that indeed will change. Because in fact, the news from the Greek economy, especially at the micro level, is very promising. So we have had industrial production rising in March about 8.7% year on year. This is the 6th consecutive month of positive growth. Manufacturing has been particularly strong, 8.6% year on year in March. Sectors with strong performance include petroleum products, good products, basic metals and pharmaceuticals. Retail sales are up 4.6% year on year in January, February. Passenger car registration rose by 22% year on year in the period January to April. Unemployment is beginning to fall. We've had in the last 4 months a net increase in jobs of 125,000. Exports of goods are especially doing well. In 2016, they rose in real terms by 6%. Now, why did we have, given all that, disappointing growth figures at the end of the last quarter in 2016 and the first quarter 2017? And the basic answer is one word: investment. And the answer to why investment has not picked up as much is, the Greek government believes, a lack of clarity about the future prospects of the Greek economy, the program, and so on. It seems to me now that there is a widespread agreement that Greece has lived up to its commitments on the reform side. In fact, I think most people have been surprised by the extent that we've met those commitments and the extent and depth of those reforms, from the public administration to finance, from banks, corporate governance in banks, to labour markets, to a whole set of issues that has changed Greece radically. So after so much effort, what the Greek government is asking for is clarity on the debt issue. And this is what was not on the table on the 22nd of May Eurogroup. Now, why is clarity so important? Clarity is important because it's important to both the Greek population, that after so many years where 27% of growth, we've lost 27% of GDP, there is a prospect of a new beginning, but it's also very important for investors. Investors need to know how Greece is going to be able to respond to its debt responsibilities over the short, medium to long run. So it is absolutely crucial for growth that we have that clarity, and that is what we're asking for in the June Eurogroup. Now, who am I asking clarity from? Well, I'm asking clarity from the IMF. The IMF in the last Eurogroup considered that the debt measures taken or to be taken were not enough for debt sustainability. Now, in part, this is because they have very pessimistic long-term growth rates of about 1%. Now, this seems to me extraordinarily pessimistic, and as an economist, as a professional economist, I'm not so keen on such long-term forecasts. I mean, consider Germany and the United Kingdom in the 1960s, let's say 1966, forecasting unemployment, say, for 2003. Is there anybody who could say that that forecast would have had any sense? Nobody would have known the fall of Bretton Woods. Nobody would have known the first oil crisis. Nobody would have known the second oil crisis. Nobody would have known the ERM crisis. And of course, they would have wildly undershot their unemployment forecasts, given that both those countries, those economies, in the middle 60s, had more or less full employment. Just as a paraphrase, in my first economic textbook when I was a 16-year-old in Britain, this textbook said that no British government could possibly win an election with unemployment above 3%, just for a historical factor. So what we're asking from the IMF is this clarity. The IMF promised to join eventually the program in August 2015. We are now 2 years after that, and we've only got 14 months of the program to go. It seems to me that it's time for the IMF to make up its mind what it wants to do and what it thinks needs to be done. Secondly, I want to turn to some countries like Germany and Holland. Now, Germany and Holland insisted that the IMF be on the program, either because they thought that would ensure a stricter program, or because they thought that the European institutions did not have the technical expertise. But if that is the case, it can't be that the IMF is good for the structural reforms and advice on the structural reforms and agreeing structural reforms, but it has nothing to say on the debt needed, the debt relief needed. So if the Holland and Germany think the IMF is a wonderful institution that knows more than European institutions on many issues, then surely it should reach a compromise with the IMF on its technical expertise on the debt sustainability. And now let me turn to the ECB, and I have the advantage of speaking after Benoit, so I can say what I think. I mean, as you all know, the ECB, just like our Lord, works in mysterious ways. Benoit said that he was he set out some criteria of how we could get into QE. He didn't tell us whether he shares the pessimistic growth assumptions of the IMF. Has there been a strong reform program? I mean, I find the IMF's view idiosyncratic. I mean, for the last 2 years, they've been part of the program in advising. We've carried out reforms. We've now agreed a new reform package for them beyond the program, and they still think growth is only going to be 1%. What is the ECB view? Does the ECB think that the package of measures in the May Eurogroup discussions, in other words, 2 weeks ago, was it enough or wasn't it enough for debt sustainability? It is very important that we have European institutions that act in a European way, independent of non-European institutions, and stand by their own opinion. I think European citizens should ask for nothing less. Finally, I want to point to an ethical dimension of what I'm saying. Now, as a professional economist, I consider one of the problems of economic science that it liberated itself in quotation marks from moral science. I once gave a paper in Cambridge, so I could be as rude as I like since I was from Oxford, on the 100 years of the economic science being separated from moral science. As some of you might know, originally, before 100 years ago, economics was part of the moral sciences. Yeah? And my statement was that that was a big disaster, that the lack of ethical issues within economics leads to bad policies which are not accepted by large strands of people. Ethics about distribution, ethics about ecological concerns, and so on. And I completely agree with Joan that those people who think because of the European growth improvement over the last year and what's been happening in the politics, if you think that we've heard the last of Wilders, and if you think we've heard the last of Le Pen, it would be a serious mistake for Europe looking towards the future. I think if we do not have an ethical dimension to our policy and to European institutions, we are still in deep trouble as Europeans. And the ethics means that when a country has done its part, when it's been asked to do a reform strategy, when it's carried out those reforms, then the burden really is on all other institutions to find a solution. It cannot be right, it cannot be ethically right, and it cannot be an ethical message to the rest of the Europeans that Greece has carried out all its reforms, and the European member states, together with the IMF, cannot provide clarity. We can all disagree about the extent of debt relief needed, and there's a big argument and good arguments on all sides, but clarity and reaching a consensus should also be part of the answer. Also, I think one of the least attractive features of the European Union and the Eurozone is kicking the can down the road. We don't decide now. We've got the politics in X country, we've got an election in B country, and we just kick the things down the road. Why is that bad? Because when you eventually have to take a decision in Europe, you're usually faced with a binary choice of something bad or something even worse. And you've excluded lots of other choices that you could have taken if you'd taken the decision early enough and in a timely fashion. So it is absolutely crucial if Europe is going, and the Eurozone in particular, is going to build on some of the things that Pierre Moscovici said looking to the forward, that this can kicking down the road stops. And thirdly and lastly, and perhaps most importantly, for 20, 30 years, we have had an economic model that has excluded an important part of both the middle class and the working class. That issue has to be addressed. If people want a European Union that is integrated, then middle class and lower class people must see their faces in that economic development, must see that although they suffered most in the crisis, they will participate in the growth phase of the cycle. If they do not participate in the growth cycle of the cycle, then be assured that we will not get out of this crisis, and it will return perhaps in a different way, in a different financial crisis, in a different bond crisis. But for all that I've said, I remain confident. I remain confident that the Europeans will be able to create those institutions and continue with those institutions that do not kick the can down the road, that take decisions in a timely fashion, and take those decisions that can give all their citizens a belief that the decisions are being taken for the good of Europe as a whole and for the good of all citizens of Europe as a whole. Thank you very much.